So this has been the bugaboo of art history for about 150 years. It's been the love to hate Bouguereau movement. I mean, if you talk to people who love Bouguereau and hate Bouguereau, it's kind of like going to a Republican and Democratic meeting in Texas, or maybe, maybe it's something like, an abortion meeting, which they've gotten really, I mean, people will throw stones at you if you're supposed to like Bouguereau, but I grew up loving Bouguereau because I didn't think it was a problem. But this is Vincent Sayers, one of his most famous pictures in the Clark Museum. It's about 1870s. And if we contrast it to what everybody's supposed to like, right here, this is Picasso's 1907 Demoiselle d'Avignon. But what we can go back and forth, and we won't do it too much, is between Bouguereau and Picasso, is not only is the subject fairly similar, and we're talking about a brothel, but this is kind of an antique brothel, because the Sayers, really lucky, and he has like one of the biggest butts to look at. For some reason, let's go back that way. The butt here is quite different, okay? But the thing that I'm saying is that both of these, besides from their technique, besides that we think, well, this is obviously a departure from the Bouguereau in some ways. I mean, revolutions are interesting and they happen for good and bad, but it was a revolution. It changed the way people saw art. But it also lost something. And it also lost something that it lost a certain amount of meaning. In its abstraction, you wouldn't lose its some of the sensuality that I see in this thing that's going around. So that's the start. So just put that back in your head, and even if you had a big breakfast with crab cakes and hollandaise sauce, there's still room in your, I had that for breakfast, it was delicious. But once you understand, once you get, I'll just hold that thought for a minute. So we know that we have Picasso, and then, but we need to really ask ourselves, what did he mean by de-skilling? And that was another word that we talked, because we talked about two things. One that has a high amount of skill that I think everybody recognizes. One that is sort of ambivalent about that kind of skill. And the third thing is what Jerry talked about, is de-skilling. All great artists are de-skilling like crazy today. Well, de-skilling is really outsourcing. Outsourcing is kind of what we've all seen, where everything's made in China, and no one knows where the chicken McNuggets come from. We know that your shirt was assembled by 50 different people that didn't have a way to embody or to have the gestalt of craft, where they knew how to weave, and they knew how to make, and they knew how to iron, and they knew how to press and present. That's a complete skill. De-skilling is something where someone who doesn't know you, in kind of the Charlie Chaplin, walking around, kind of look like that sometimes, but this kind of way to, modern life where he's doing a little bit of a little bit. And unfortunately, art has gotten to the point where people are not only are they not interested in skill, but they're not interested in who makes the art that they have. They're fine with little sound bites or little pieces. So I just wanted to start to contrast, which you'll see in a lot of museums, a lot of famous people who make these skilled art. And this is Damien Hirst. It's called Valium, and it's from 2000. The one thing people don't understand, which I kind of like this because it's colorful and interesting, and again, I'm not holding judgment about people's taste, and this is not even about, this lecture is not about right or wrong, it's just about thinking a new way to look at things. The thing about the thing about this is that each circle here is painted by an assistant. And each circle, Mr. Hirst doesn't even touch any of this. So it's sort of the ultimate, to me, the symbol of de-skilling. It's outsourced a little bit of labor by a lot of people who aren't involved in the making of art. So it's an outsourced thing. Fine, it's quite simple. The next thing is something that is another type of de-skilling that's happening in the art world right now, is sort of the found objects. And these are two images from the Pulse Fair in Miami. One is a twig with a piece of paper on it, and one is a paint stick that had been painted. So these are really saying a lot of different things. And if we're just talking about art as technique, and technique is influence, we have to think about the issues of what is it like to find something? What is it like to not have painted it yourself? What is it like to put very little effort into making that? And what is it like to then put it in a museum and ask somebody to take it at its face value, which I think people should do. I'm very much an advocate of people looking at art. Now, all of this is the backdrop, because we see a lot of this. If you go to the LACMAs, the MoMAs, the YMCA MACMAs, or whatever, they've all got a muck in the back. There is a certain kind of something you expect. You expect a lot of things, often things like this. In fact, a lot of people find this very cutting edge and curious too. But as a technical point of view, it says something very different.
It certainly says something very different about the 19th century. And the 19th century was something, like it or not, of a whole generation that was obsessed with technique. Now, the critics, its detractors say that's all it was obsessed with. But what I'm suggesting is that the technique was part of the influence. It's a kind of like, it's an eloquence and an addition and a communion of an artist with its craft, its maker. What did it want to present? It wanted to present something that was long-lasting. And so I want you to think about the 19th century, and not in a pejorative terms, but in a time where these were intelligent people who were going through a process of offering you a communion with what they're doing, an added meaning. Why was there a little bitty Masonier that someone was staring at in amazement? And amazement is something quite intoxicating. I don't know if you have friends that you're amazed by. They've done something that's meticulous. They even mowed your lawn or planted the perfect ice plant. I mean, these palm trees are amazing. But it's a visceral kind of connection with art. So we look back in the 19th century, and we kind of ask what, something that was a very different time and a very different place when people really had to learn technique. And this right here is an image of something I'm very interested in. This is a sort of, what would the beginner, I was a little young kid and I really wanted to learn to draw, and I was thinking, gosh, how am I going to ever do this? Every school in the 19th century, every lycée, would have a copybook, something that you would learn how to draw basic things from. I mean, it's kind of like now, I think when I was a kid, we used to draw Wonder Woman and Superman, and I don't admit to that, and though it's being recorded, so now I think it's posterity. They started out with drawing books, and they had a real platonic sort of prejudice, so they wanted to start with something that they thought was essential, and they started with faces, and this is by Charles Bard, and he's an artist who did a drawing book in 1860 that a lot of famous people did, and it was such a ubiquitous thing that even Picasso and Van Gogh used this practice.